you wondering what science curriculum to use for your homeschooler in high school? In this video, I'm going to give a general overview of my experience with physical science, biology, and chemistry. Then I'm going to talk about my experience with Apologia in each of those sciences and talk about whether I would recommend that you use Apologia in your own homeschool. Additionally, I'll give some tips on what materials you should buy and what you should do in order to make Apologia the best experience possible with your student. Finally, I will give a recommendation on what sequence your student should take the sciences in and help you decide what fourth science, if they take a fourth science at all, they should take in addition to the 3 mentioned in this video. I'll also share why I only talked about 3 sciences instead of 4. Okay, so first off, physical science. Physical science is very similar to earth science. You get a general overview of how the earth works, why the earth works the way it does, such as general geological factors, why the weather acts the way it does, that kind of basic thing. Physical science is great because it's very applicable. Students get to apply what they see in real life and learn how things work the way they do. It'll feel useful, and students generally enjoy this course. It's not super difficult, so many students will choose to take it in either 9th or 10th grade. Certainly, you need to choose a curriculum that's visual, whether or not your student is a visual learner, because this particular course would be very difficult to take if you did not use a curriculum with a lot of infographics and pictures. Physical science is a great introductory science course to high school. I would generally suggest students take it in 9th grade, but they could take it later as well. It's an easier science, the concepts are not too difficult, and there's not a lot of calculation, so make sure you choose a curriculum that doesn't make physical science any harder than it should be. So my physical science curriculum review. As you can see here, it's the 3rd edition of the book. There's a 4th edition out. When I was taking this course in 9th grade, there were only 3 editions, so I used the 3rd. But I'm sure that if there's a 4th, they've only improved on it further. And I have to say, I loved the Apologia physical science curriculum. I'll just go through the book with you and show you there's tons and tons of pictures and infographics all along in the pages to help students be able to better understand the concepts. Apologia has tests. They have, let me see here, 15 modules. And the last module, I believe, is for a research paper, but I'll get into that in a second. So the 15 modules, generally I'd recommend you complete one every 2 weeks or so. So that's about 30 weeks of coursework. You can take more if you need to. There's study guides in here, which is kind of like a quiz, and then there's exams. And so I would highly recommend, if you choose Apologia, to get the exam test booklet. This is the chemistry one, obviously. I also own the physical science one, but did not get it out of my basement. Definitely would strongly recommend getting that. It has all the answer keys to the tests and additional to the study guides, so your student doesn't have that in their book. There's several other resources that you can use as an aid when you're taking physical science. There's the student notebook, and if your student is still learning how to take notes or plans on participating in class with experiments, or just generally is a visual learner, then I would really recommend students get the notebook. I personally did it. All the other students that were in the class that we were all doing physical science together did. I got to see the benefits. I personally didn't feel like I needed it. You can get by without it, but it's definitely great to go ahead and try using it in physical science. If you feel like you didn't need it, you don't have to get it in following years. Instead, I just took notes in a lab journal with on graph paper, and that worked well for me. But again, the research notebook is a great option. There's videos that you can purchase on Apologia's website. I'll include the link for that in the description of the video. There's also live classrooms that you can purchase. You don't have to get a live classroom or a classroom experience for your student in physical science as much as you do in the later sciences, but it's still really nice to be able to do physical science with other people who are all using the same curriculum as you. So whether that's through a local homeschool group or through Apologia's live classroom, I would really suggest it. There are experiments that you do in physical science, and some of the materials that are required are things that you may not have at home. So an example, I'm looking at an experiment here. They just require eggs, cardboard, books, scissors, cookie sheet, all those types of items you're gonna have at home. But there are a couple, like batteries, that you may or may not. So in that case, it is nice to have a live classroom where they do the experiment for you, or if you have a video, or go to a classroom with your homeschool group that is doing Apologia, so that you don't have to buy materials for all the experiments. The big thing with this curriculum is the research paper at the very end, and they begin talking about that, yes, in the final chapter. So here's a heads up, if you're planning on taking this curriculum, it's a good thing you watch this video, because halfway through the year in December, you need to go ahead and read chapter 15. I know it sounds really weird skipping ahead, but you have a research paper that's due, but it's completely doable. You just need to make sure you start with enough time in advance, preferably in January, so you have a whole semester and you can take it in little bite-sized chunks at this point. As always, one of the wonderful things about the Apologia curriculum is the fact that it's all Christian, and so you're not going to have a non-Christian, particularly evolutionist perspectives coming in here, and those that do, they're going to thoroughly explain the evolutionist perspective and then the opposing Christian perspective. And so that's just one of the beauties of the Apologia curriculum. Overall, my experience with Apologia's physical science was amazing. As I said, I loved how visual the book was. They did a great job explaining all of the concepts. My experience with the tests was excellent, and I think that physical science with Apologia would be a great choice for any homeschool family. Okay, the next science, biology. So I chose to take biology in 10th grade. Biology has a lot of factors that it covers. It covers like basically all living things. So one chapter you'll be talking about genes, and the next you'll be talking about the living parts of a tree, and the next you'll be talking about how the body processes energy. So there's a lot of concepts. To be honest, I did not particularly appreciate biology because I'm the type of person that really wants to find information I'm learning useful, and I didn't particularly find the information too useful, other than the genetics section, which I really enjoyed. But don't let that persuade you to not take biology at all. Biology, along with physical science, is to some extent a non-negotiable in high school. You need to take some amount of these two sciences. In what order, in what grade, that's all up to you. And of course, what curriculum is up to you as well. So generally, biology is fairly concept heavy. The material is much more difficult to understand than physical science. And if you compare it to chemistry, it's not as calculation heavy. In fact, there's really no calculation work at all, but the concepts are weighty. And so it's important to understand that when planning out your students' week, because they're going to need some time to be able to process, and you shouldn't be able to expect the student to go through a whole chapter all in one day, versus you might be able to do that, for example, through physical science. But overall, biology is not, like I said, too difficult, not calculationally based. The concepts are weighty, so it's important to understand that when choosing to take biology, and plan your year out knowing that biology will take some time to get through, but it's not too difficult of a course. So with that, let me talk about my experience with the biology textbook in Apologia. Biology! So biology with Apologia was generally pretty good. It took a little bit of a rocky start to find a rhythm and to really figure out how biology was going to work for me this year. So the biology textbook is genuinely good. There are 16 chapters instead of 15. That's important to note in comparison to the physical science book. And with physical science, one of the last chapters is only about building a research paper. So there really are 2 more chapters. Generally, again, I'd recommend you complete one every 2 weeks or so. So the course will probably take you a little bit longer. The concepts don't really build on themselves too much, which is nice. So you, just like physical science, there are several supplementary materials that you can get. You can get the test packet, and this is one tip I have here is biology is very vocab heavy. I was writing down definitions for about 80 vocab words every 2 weeks. And so if you choose to take the Apologia tests, I would really recommend allowing your student to take the tests open book, because it is a lot of material to try to digest and memorize the vocab words for over 2 weeks. Additionally, there are alternate tests available online, which I chose to take, that have more multiple choice and are a little bit easier to complete. The Apologia tests are all free response, no multiple choice answers. So I chose to take the alternate tests, and that was a great alternative so that I could choose to take closed book exams. So that was one of the adjustments I had to make, because I was struggling trying to study really hard before an exam, and it just wasn't working very well, because I was memorizing a bunch of information only to forget it a couple days later because I didn't have to review the information anymore. So again, you can get the research notebook for Apologia, and if your student found it helpful in physical science, if they chose to take it, it could be a great option. If your student's a visual learner or they're still learning how to take notes, this is a great thing for them. One important thing to note is you are going to be using a microscope. And so if you don't have a class that you are attending in person, you're going to want to purchase a fairly high quality microscope for this exam, or for this course, sorry. With that said, I would highly recommend you have some kind of live learning environment, whether it's Apologia's class or it's some form of class locally, at least videos online, because this is so live based. All college courses are going to offer a lab credit for this type of exam. You are going to be doing a lot of experiments in this course, and they're going to have a decent amount of materials for the experiments that you just don't have at home. And so you're either going to have to go out and buy a lot of the resources or go talk to a teacher and get some from them, or just do the experiment in class with other students and have the teacher purchase resources. So one thing that students are going to begin doing in biology is creating formal lab reports. They may have already begun this in physical science as well, but this is one resource I found extra helpful for, it's not Apologia recommended, but it helped me create my own lab reports. It's called the Student Lab Report Handbook, and if I can find an Amazon link to purchase that, I'll try to put that in the description. And so that talked about exactly how you're supposed to complete a formal lab report. When they are taking biology, they're going to want to create a lab journal. And what that is a notebook with graph paper that records their experience with all the experiments that they've been doing. And then they're gonna create a typed formal lab report on that information. And they're gonna wanna do that probably about every 2 or 3 weeks. So that's kind of the additional thing instead of the research paper that they would do. Physical science is the formal lab reports. One last thing in biology is your student will get to do dissections. And so you're either gonna want to order that dissection kit from Apologia or to order those animals separately so that you can do dissections at home. This is another great reason to have some kind of live class because it's much easier to have a teacher order those animals and then just do it in class than having to do all that by yourself. But this class is doable at home without a classroom format, but it will be more difficult. And in order to truly get the full experience, it's best for students to have other classmates that they're doing it with. The one thing I did not like about the Apologia curriculum was some of the concepts were not explained super well. The majority of them were, but there were probably 3 or 4 that I never really fully understood. And so this is where having live class or videos are going to be really helpful. But if you can't afford the class or don't have access to any kind of videos, then Apologia Biology might not be a great resource if you're not willing to only partially learn some concepts. The biology course overall, vast majority of chapters and concepts are very well explained, but there are a couple that are not explained, in my opinion, as well as they should be. Okay, chemistry, the third and final science that I'm going to talk about today. I took chemistry in 11th grade, and chemistry kind of gets a bad rap because a lot of students feel like it's really hard. Chemistry, concept-wise, is not any more difficult than biology, but it has a lot of math. So if your student is not very confident in math, they're going to struggle. It doesn't matter what curriculum you use, whether it's Apologia or not, they're going to have a hard time. If you choose something that's not as math heavy, then the ultimate result is going to be the chemistry is watered down and the quality of their learning is just going to be diminished. It's not worth it to try to choose a curriculum that's less math heavy. With that said, there are some steps that you can take in order to try to make your students' experiments with chemistry as good as possible. Generally, I'd recommend, if at all possible, that your student finish Algebra 2 before they take chemistry. If your student is taking Algebra 2, say in their senior year, then try to take it while they're taking Algebra 2 at least, because chemistry, math includes all the way through algebra. No pre-calculus concepts, but all the way through algebra. Luckily for me, I was taking calculus at the time, so I was completely through with algebra, and honestly, I liked it better than biology because I felt like it was a little bit more applicable. It helped me understand like how batteries work and why water bonds the way it does. And so it just made a little bit more sense, was a little bit more interesting to me overall. Like I said, chemistry is not super highly thought of, but your student is going to do absolutely fine with it if they have that solid math foundation of having finished Algebra 2. So my experience with Apologia's chemistry curriculum, I thought they did a great job. Considering that it's so math heavy, they did a great job explaining it. They even give you example problems and how to do all of the math concepts. I'm trying to find one in here right now. So like they give you a full rundown of exactly what you need to do and the problem. And that's super helpful. The lab reports, yes, your student is still going to be doing lab reports because the experiments are honestly going to get a little bit more difficult in this chapter. This is why I generally recommend students take it in either 11th or 12th grade, but I'm getting sidetracked. The lab reports are generally going to be very math heavy, but one thing that's nice is within the chemistry test packet, they give you an explanation of how to do all the math behind the lab reports. And so your student can do the lab report and then you can go back and check it. It doesn't just feel like you have no idea whether you did your lab report correctly or not. I was able to take dual enrollment chemistry with this. I got an A. It's through classical conversations. Some of you may know what that is, some of you may not. It's only for classical conversations homeschool students. So yeah, you can't just choose to take it. But anyway, I did generally find about half of the experiments that they chose to assign us to do formal lab reports on were very math heavy. The rest were not. The other two were not. And so if your student wants to take more of a college level chemistry, they should do those math heavy lab reports. But if they're looking for more of a high school level chemistry, then they don't have to do the super mathy lab reports, but still go ahead and do the experiments at home. Again, there's a lot of things, even more than biology, that are required for the experiments that you just may not have at home. So once again, it's going to be really helpful for you to have some kind of live online class or in-person class to be able to do this with, especially because it's so math heavy. You can ask your instructor for help trying to understand this concept. At least having some kind of video that you can go back and watch and have it explained to you. Again, Apologia offers both videos and an online learning instruction environment. So that's great. My experience with the test packet in chemistry was better than it was in biology. I originally was using alternate tests for chemistry again, but I realized I did not like them. I was finding mistakes in the tests. I was realizing that there were concepts that we were being asked to talk about and be tested on that we hadn't learned in the textbook. And I don't know if they've been created for a different edition of chemistry. I had the 3rd edition, but I didn't have the ability to get an A on those exams, so I ended up switching back over to the official test packet and liked it a lot better. One other thing that Apologia offers students to purchase is a chemistry lab set. And if you're doing the lab experiments at home, this is definitely something you're going to want to buy, whether it's Apologia's chemistry lab set or another lab set from online, because you're going to want to have those beakers and vials and eyedroppers. You could probably use some of your basic kitchen materials at home, but you're going to be using them so much that it really is worth it to just go ahead and break down and buy an actual chemistry set. The way Apologia is structured is that you have 16 modules of assignments, so very similar to biology. The first semester is largely going to be building on itself, and so your student is going to need to get a very firm foundation within that first half of the book. After that, it doesn't build on itself quite so much, but you're learning everything that you used from that first semester. So it's important to keep those skills up to date. So overall, would I recommend chemistry? Yes. The chemistry is hard. I'm not going to deny that for the majority of students, they find that it's very difficult. But Apologia does not make chemistry harder than it should be. They do a great job. If anything, they probably make it easier than many other science curriculums would. And so for that reason, I would recommend that you go with Apologia in comparison to biology, which I thought maybe made it a little bit harder than it should have been for me. But anyway, yes, the chemistry curriculum that Apologia has is excellent. Okay, the long promised awaited moment. What order should you take the physical science, biology, and chemistry curriculums in, whether you're choosing to do Apologia or not? So this all depends on your students' goals and how many sciences they plan to take in high school. So I'm going to break it down here in kind of a chart and go through each of the options for you so you can decide. First of all, if your student is not planning on going to college, then you need to look up your state's requirements. Some states may require you only to have 2 years of science. Some states might not have any requirements, some may have stricter requirements, so it's important to look those up. Generally, whether you're taking college classes, planning on going to college or not, Physical science and biology are fairly non-negotiable. You need to take both of those. If your state requires more than 2 sciences, I'd suggest that you either take chemistry and an additional science, or that you choose to take some of the additional sciences that Apologia also offers, which I did not cover in this video, such as marine biology, forensic science, geology, and more curriculums similar to that. So there's a little bit more freedom for you to choose what sciences your student will take if you're not planning on going to college. But if you don't know what their future looks like, whether they're going to go to college or not, it's best to go ahead and keep them on a college-bound route so that they don't regret moving off that path later. So if your student is planning on going to college, let's talk about that. First, you need to differentiate between what kinds of majors that they're looking to get. Are they looking to go more into the liberal arts fields or into the STEM fields? If your student is planning on going to college at all, they're generally going to have 4 years of science, even if the state doesn't require that. But what those sciences are is going to be different depending on what major they're interested in. If they're getting a liberal arts major, there's a little bit more freedom. Again, physical science and biology are fairly non-negotiable, and if you're going to college, chemistry is as well. But you could also choose to take one more fun science, like I already mentioned, for non-college students, such as marine biology and forensic science or zoology. And so depending on your students' math skills or general maturity, you're gonna want to adjust the order that you take those in. So if your student is completing Algebra 2, then the following year, you're generally going to want to plan to take chemistry. And in general, I'd recommend students take the classes in the order of physical science, biology, and chemistry, because that's the order with which they build in difficulty of concept level. But you could choose to make it or give them an easy senior and light senior year by throwing the fun science in then, or choosing to put it in the middle somewhere or in 9th grade year. If your student is planning on getting a STEM major, then colleges generally want to see that they have calculus level math on their transcript, physics, and chemistry. Again, physical science and biology are pretty non-negotiable, so that lays out the 4 sciences your student is going to need to take when they're in high school if they're planning on getting a STEM major. Physical science, biology, chemistry, and physics. Physics and chemistry are both math heavy, so generally I'd recommend that your student take those in 11th and 12th grade. As long as they're able to get some amount of calculus coursework done in high school, then they're not going to have a problem running into the Algebra 2 barrier. So generally saving those physical science and biology for 9th and 10th grade is going to be best. I hope you found this video helpful, talking about general sciences that you should take while in high school, giving recommendations on which sciences you should take depending on what career track your student sees themselves on. And I hope you also found it helpful in deciding whether taking Apologia physical science, biology, and or chemistry would be the right fit for your family. If you enjoyed the video, then I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. If you have any questions or ideas for future videos that would be helpful for you and your family, I would love to know about it. So please comment about that below. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.